What I've got here is one of my buddy Bill Erdman's small Rapalas. Bill's one of the best lure gear guys I've ever met in my life. This guy puts down more fish than most people will do in a lifetime. Bill will do in a season. This would be the smallest plug Bill would use. And if you're wondering, it's a good idea to maybe study what some of the gear guys do, because they put a lot of big fish in and they hook up with fish. Bill fishes frequently lures that are 9 inches long, catches some pretty dang big fish. So we've got to learn from the gear guys as well as the fly guys, because they're the ones really that have been doing it forever. So what I've got here, this is a swimmy jimmy. And you can see it's virtually the same size. So that's a big fly for sure. But if you're going to trigger a response out of a really big predator, you're going to have something that makes it worthwhile. A fish that's going to come to a fly that you're going to try to trigger a predatory response from isn't going to come up very often. For every rule, there's a rule that's been broken for sure, because a lot of people have caught some big fish, by mistake mostly, I might add, on little tiny flies. If you're going to trigger that response, it's going to have something with substance. It's going to have to be a fly that if the fish is going to break out of his holding pattern and come and get that fly, it's going to have to be worth his while. I frequently use the analogy of grizzly bears because everybody knows that they're not supposed to run away from a grizzly. And we're trying to think like that as a predaceous thing. When you think about a grizzly, a lot of things come to mind, mostly him eating you. And so what we're trying to do is kind of think in the same respect. The big brown trout or a big rainbow is the biggest predator in his system generally. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in, we're going to throw a really big fly, and then we're going to try to run away from the fish. We're not necessarily presenting this fly as food, just haphazardly, just happen to fall into his face and he takes a bite at it. That's not very common. It's not natural, you know. The minnows don't just swim up to a big brown and go, hey, how you doing today? They try to escape. And so that's what we're going to do with these big flies. And so what I've got here in front of me is a swimmy jimmy, but I'm going to go through my fly box. I'm going to take you through how I sequence the flies. I'll show you the flies. There's different styles of flies. There's floating line flies. There's vertical jig flies. There's jerk strip retrieve flies. And there's just general flies. I mean, you could fish on any of the other styles, whether you're dry fly or dry line fishing or wet line fishing like I do mostly. But I'm going to show you all of them just so you get an idea, and I'll show you how I sequence my flies, because I really think that color is the #1 trigger for the fish. When you establish the color of the fly, it doesn't matter if it's a stacked blonde or a sex dungeon or a zoo cougar or whatever it is, you figure the color first, and you'll see that in the video that we did on all the rivers. I switched over to a gray boogeyman. It's all wet right now, you can't really see, but it's got a double flank feather on the top, wool head, and those spread out when they get wet. It gives a pretty big profile. The 4th fish that's ate it in probably 10 minutes. And we went a half hour, 40 minutes without just a couple eats on the darker colors. Usually I start dark on a dark day, but that's why I think it's so critical that you just keep changing colors. You have to have something that tells you what you've fished and what you should be fishing. If you have a great day, yesterday for example on olive, when you hit the river, all you're going to fish is olive. Everybody does it, I do it, everybody has a little pattern they get put into. And what you're trying to do is break that pattern to maximize your ability to find what the fish want to eat. To do that, one of the most critical parts of all this stuff in here is this box right here that is marked drying. And when you open it up, you see nothing, because this is where you're going to put your flies. It doesn't matter where you do it, but you've got to have something that tells you what you've used. I use a sequence that I developed and when I was guiding, because as a guide, you know, what I have to do is I have to get my clients into fish as quickly as possible. And so to eliminate the repetitiveness that happens from having a good day with another fly, I came up with this I had a drying box and I had drying patches in the boat so I could physically see what I was doing. If you don't do that, what you end up doing is you'll say, well, I should be sequencing here, and I'm going to start with olive, and then I'll put on a different color olive, and then I'll put on something else, gray, and then I go back to olive. And you see, if you look at your sequence, you really haven't changed anything. You just keep going back, back, back because you had good fishing on it. So this is the way I do my sequencing, and it really doesn't matter if you use my way or your way, whoever's. Just be mindful that you need to keep switching that color over and over to find which color the fish are on. And I'll tell you, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to hold that way all day. It might last an hour, it might last all day. Great, if that's the case, hallelujah. But a lot of times it's an hour or two window, and all of a sudden it just starts going off, and you've got to switch up. And as soon as you switch up, just like that, you find out what they're on. Here's the basic principle. It's starting out today, it's really bright out, so I'm going to go white or gray. Then I'm going to do a complete contrast. Nothing, 5, 10, 15 minutes, you don't get an eat. Then I totally contrast in the white. I'm in the opaque colors. I go from white to black. All right? Complete contrast. Nothing happens. Again, 5, 10, 15 minutes. I go off the black, and then I start going to the neutral end of the colors, and the light end of neutral is tan. All right? That doesn't work. Then I go to olive. If that doesn't work, I go to yellow or chartreuse. And again, that's just how I do it, whatever you come up with. And it doesn't mean those are the only colors either. You might have blue in there, you might have purples in there, you might have reds in there. It doesn't matter. You could have 50 colors. Just rotate them. That's where the drying box comes in. See what you're doing. We did it the other day. We were on the river and I was watching, and I put twice I did it. I put olive on. I changed the shade. Neither of them worked. I completely contrasted, went to tan, just like that, a fish ate it. So that's just how I do it. So as you can see, I go by color, and I also go by style of fly. I'm too much of a fly junkie. I could probably cull this down. As you'll see when I open them up, it's pretty ridiculous. I've got a problem I should see somebody about, but I love flies. So I go, originally it was all colored. Now you can see over here I go peanut envies, butt monkeys, sex dungeons, TNAs, cougars, standard circus peanuts. It's just blondes down here, boogeymen and big hole bugs. I got, again, tips up, TNAs, smoke wagons. They're set up by color, but they're also set up by the style of fly. Again, I'm just too big of a fly junkie, so I should pare it down. I just can't stop myself. But I'll open some of these up so you can see them, how, just kind of the basic sequence, and you can get an idea of the flies. And then we'll go over the different types of flies. We're going to have the dry line flies, the vertical jig stuff, some of the just jerk strip retrieve flies that work better with that. We'll just kind of go through them, give you an idea of what we're fishing, and you can see them all.